He's combed it.
Well, I haven't. That's the thing. Maybe it's not combed. Okay, so it looks
Okay.
like we're live.
Okay,
Hey there,
cool.
everyone. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that's really been on the top of everybody's mind. Interest rates have increased substantially over the last 12 months, and people are really struggling with mortgages, home ownership, even if you have an investment property. It's really tough out there right now. So we're going to tackle this subject today. We're going to see what everybody has to say about it. And so I want to welcome everybody. Welcome, Sally.
Hello.
And Paul Cummings, the other Paul, and
Hi, Paul.
Adrian Charles. Now, one of the things, when I mentioned this to Paul Cummings, he said it's only going to get worse. Can you tell us why it's only going to get worse?
I was reading an article this morning, interestingly enough, so this is perfect timing as far as talking about it. And the guy that wrote it was talking about for somebody with a mortgage of $350,000, it's gone up by nearly $800 a month in terms of their payments. Now, the average property in Australia now, certainly in cities, is way more than that. So if you're talking about $1 million property, that means you've gone up, $2,400 a month. There's more interest rates rises coming. There's people that are still on those honeymoon interest rates, and apparently some of those are about to come off as well. So people that had a 2 in front of their interest rate, so 2.0, 2.2, whatever, they're about to go onto probably a standard variable rate if they don't refinance. So with those rate rises, the banks are actually getting a bit concerned, and the banks may artificially try to force interest rates down so that they don't get caught out as well. So when someone else is talking, I'll try and dig up the actual article and come back and give you some more information on the actual figures themselves. But the predictions are that at least for the next year, there's going to be a lot of hurt out there in terms of mortgages.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned your bank, because my bank actually rang me up at the beginning of the year to offer me a decrease in my interest rates. And I got to speak to the banks, and I said, well, thank you for offering this to me. You don't normally do this. And the reason why is because this was at the beginning of the year. So this is 10 months ago. They were already feeling the pain of the people were already feeling the pain, and the banks were already starting to worry back then about these interest rate increases. And yeah, it as you said, interest rates, you're talking about a 2 in front of it, right? A lot of those that were fixed at 1.89%. So if you're going from 1.89% to 6%, your repayments have gone up 300 times, right? So, and you say 350,000 is $800. I know our mortgage, so I do have a mortgage. Ours is $550. It's gone up $1,000. So, and that's a month. So that's $12,000 of after-tax money I have to find just to stay in the house that I'm in. Adrian, I know that you don't have a house, so what's your view on home ownership and all of this?
Well, in fact, I do. I own a very nice apartment in Bangkok that I didn't bring with me when we moved back to Australia. It's still there.
Yeah, it's not something you can put in your pocket.
No, and but I would say the problems that are coming is that people, long-term investment is long-term investment. The problem is when they translate it into home ownership, they kind of set and forget, and they think they're safe. They don't consider, because certainly a lot of them don't own it outright. If you own it outright, there's not much of a problem with things. But if you have a mortgage, that turns the whole advantage of it at the mercy of the market. And I think, people say, okay, it's safe as a house, but actually you've got to look at the whole factor of the rest of the world. It's not a set and forget transaction because there are other influences. And I think that's the problem, is people for them it's a no-brainer because their whole family's done it, generations have done it, but they don't understand we still live on a planet that is affected by other countries. What they do, that trickles down in different ways to us. And probably Sally would agree with me on the spiritual level. We're connected with other people. If we're connected with them spiritually, we're also connected with them financially and education wise. Everything is connected in the universe. So why would someone think a dwelling in suburbia in a metropolitan city is immune to the rest of the world? Crazy. But that's people's education, and their perception of where they are in the universe. Thank you for letting me speak.
You're welcome. Well,
So
I want to go to Sally because Sally and I have been doing this for about a year now. So
yeah, a bit over a year. And so here's a really interesting perspective. So I wasn't able to join us last week because I've been in Kakadu for a week with a personal Aboriginal guide and talking to him about, what's important in life and, reality, and how, in Australia in particular, how it was the Aborigines and how they used to live before we were colonised and that sort of thing. And their ethos, which is, there's so much that I learned and that can I bring to the table here, the whole subject of ownership. Like, we're here for just a small blimp of time out of the whole entire, the planet's been around like forever, Earth's been around forever, and us inhabiting as humans has been a small amount of time. And particularly in Australia, we've, since Captain Cook and all those days, it's only been 200 years. And all these guys were surviving before we came here. And part of the culture of the Aboriginals is that they don't own anything. It's not theirs to own. It's like the earth is here, the land is here. We don't own this land. We are just very grateful to be living in this time and having and living off the land. But the whole thing that we have to own the soil, we have to own the turf, and I'd learnt so much of the way that the Aborigines live and understanding why there's so many differences with them trying to acclimatise with the way that we live, and we're trying to force them to live because nothing's just one person's. You share. It's about connection. It's about collaborative. It's about community, and it's sharing and caring like that. So you have your own sort of regions, and you sort of shop and live within those regions, if you like. So you spear animals, or you do whatever within your region. But if the region next door doesn't have enough, you share. And so it really brought it back to, we're carrying on about nuts and bolts down here, about stuff that doesn't matter in the big picture. I know we have to find that midline, if you like, but we all started this conversation about, having the growing up with the dream of the quarter acre block, quarter acre, corner block. And I think those days have changed a lot for lots and lots of reasons. And, as Paul was saying, it's only going to get worse with interest rates rising, the pressures on family, the mental health that comes out of that, the stress, the pressure. Like stress is, the number one thing affecting the whole entire world. I'm not saying we all have to turn in and live like the Aborigines or turn into hippies. I'm not saying that at all. But I think we need to really stop and review about what is important and what is sustainable. It's like with Adrian, we started talking the other week. It's not that you grow up, you get married, and then you have kids. It's everybody's ideology has changed. And I think once we sort of stop and think for ourselves, what is it that I'm really wanting to tap into in life? What brings me passion? What brings me joy? Because we're only here for a short time, and we want it to be an arduous time where we're worried about the things like a mortgage and repayments and bills. Yes, they do exist, but can we, let go of our expectations on ourselves and let go of the judgments of others and step more into our power and really think about what is it that is important to me in life. Family, for example, like I've got kids, that's important. But is it having the biggest, greatest and the best? Because as you mentioned, Paul, we're never going to achieve that. The Joneses are always going to be one step ahead. So it's about paring it back and becoming not so superficial, but becoming more aligned with our own sort of our values and what's important, and stepping into that. And I think the world has gone slightly skew-if with what's driving it. And greed is underpinning a lot, and money, as what this group is all about, is an energy. And sometimes we get lost with that reminder that it is an energy, and it started off as an exchange item, right, for goods and services. And I think if we can bring it back to basics about, which is what you're doing in this group, Paul, really having these discussions about, well, what are we using it for? What's really important? Because it's real life issues, the effect of these extra repayments every month, what is it doing to the family, the dynamics, the relationships. And I really see mental health suffering. I see relationships suffering. The pressure between the couples flows onto the kids. The kids have issues. Kids are like vaping, they're doing drugs, they're doing all of this. And you've got to see the ripple down effect, and where is it starting? And, you know, a lot of people because I live in the country, and I look at the way the kids have been brought up, and they don't have all the latest mod cons, but yet they're very happy to go out riding on a BMX and not have to worry about getting kidnapped or whatever. It's safe. So I think there's a lot of sort of stop and have a look in our own backyard and assess what is important. And particularly if we're choosing to immerse ourselves in these big cities, finding a midline where we can sort of cohabitate with the Joneses, but also cohabitate with, our own values, and stay true to that. So here endeth my sermon. So what do you think of that? I don't know. That was my takeaway from being away.
Now, look, that's very interesting. And I love the fact that you brought into, I don't think we should talk about the yes vote or the no vote. But you brought in about the Aborigines and how they don't own anything. But the reality is that in this group, very few of us are Aborigines. Most of us are Caucasians, or we're not from the land, if you want to call it that. And for a lot of people have gone out and they have acquired themselves a property to live in rather than to rent it out. And what I'm seeing in my case is I would rather have the mortgage than not have that mortgage, because I'm still going to be paying that rent anyway. And I think, Paul, you experience this yourself. Just when they want to increase their rates, they can go up substantially, and so much so that you're forced to move out. And yes, look, my rates have gone up substantially. They've gone up 25%, whatever it is, 25%. That's a substantial increase in rates. However, I've still got something that I can sell at the end of the day if I can't make the payments. Whereas if I've just got rent, if I'm just renting a place, I've got nothing to sell. And we got our 10-year anniversary, so we've been in this house for 10 years now. And yeah, it's kind of like almost doubled in price. So it has got its 7% per annum. Now, and so does anybody else want to add anything to that?
Yeah.
Paul, yes, Paul.
In terms of the mortgage stress, I just did a bit of reading earlier on, back to that article, and they consider mortgage stress being if 30% or more of your net income goes against housing costs, as in buying, then you're in mortgage stress. At the moment, 39% of Australians are paying more than 30% of their income in mortgages. I can't remember, I think it was 16% are paying nearly up to 40%. And I can't remember the figures, some paying 50% at the moment, and there's still more interest rates to come. And in terms of, we're talking here about obviously buying, but there's also the rental market in terms of stress of renting. And you mentioned it, Paul. So last year, my rents went up by 20%. And I thought then, you know what, I should really move. And I didn't. I stayed for a year, and they put it up another 20%. So it went up 40% in just over 12 months. And I had no choice in it. And this time And in fact, I'd said to myself, if the rent goes up, I'm moving. 2 days later, they gave me notice that it was going up, and I did. I bailed out just before it was due to hit. I got a 60 days notice, and I moved out around about 58 days afterwards. And it's not affordable as a tenant either. And this person had owned the place since the 70s, so it's not as though the landlord owed any money on it. Maybe it mortgaged against other things. But there's, videos on Facebook where people are talking about their property investments. And so every time, all that mortgage they're getting charged from the bank, they're passing it on to tenants. Whereas it used to be years ago, you would actually make a loss on a property. I owned a place, I bought a place actually when interest rates were at 8% years ago. And that's higher than what they are now, I think. I wasn't in the market when it went up to...
You didn't pay $1 million.
No, it was way less, but still, it was still 8%. In terms of wages and what it was, it was a fair commitment to go in and buy it. It was in Melbourne. But yeah, having owned properties, there's, when interest rates go up, as a property owner, you sort of war that because you get, tax deductions against the rental property. You've got negative gearing, but people are now wanting to just pass it on. So they're almost getting greedy at both ends. They're getting the benefit of where they can offset it against their income, but they don't want to anymore. So it's a whole different dynamic, even as a property owner, I think, in terms of the stress that's been caused for tenants. So when the government talks about home affordability, they're not looking at the affordability for those that actually are renting. I know other people as well. I mean, post-COVID, even around the Central Coast, rents went up, jumped a couple of $100 a week on the Central Coast, up around Adrian's territory. So, I considered actually moving up there at one stage, and in places, and not fancy places, it was going to cost me as much to live up there as it was to live in Sydney. So.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you keep saying that interest rates are going to increase. And I was in a discussion this morning I went to a networking event, and it was a poor turnout. So there's just a group of us. There's only 4 of us. And they did start talking about property. And, these are people, Andrew Woodward, same last name, different, not related to me. He's in finance himself, and he's saying that there's no more rate increases. And, yes, what was it? Yesterday, the Reserve Bank did not increase rates again. And he tends to think that this is the end of the cycle. Paul doesn't seem to think. What about Adrian, Sally? Do you think interest rates are still going to go up? Because Sally, you're nodding yes. Why do you think rates?
I'm no economist, but I listen to stuff, and I cannot see it not going up. That's my gut feel, and that's just me. As just, whatever the media says, they said, that they were saying that by the end of next year, I thought they said there would be 3. I don't know, might be wrong there, but definitely going up. That's just my gut feel too.
All right, okay.
What I just wanted to add on the other thing is that a fact is a fact that, whether you're renting or mortgage, it's increasing, right? Because I'm renting as well and everything's going up, and I get that. But if we have the awareness of the flow-on effect of how it's affecting us, because I was just Googling up mental stress, and it says it's a key contributor to hypertension and cardiovascular disease. So that's heart and stroke. That's one of the highest things killing us at the moment. So if we have the awareness of what it's doing to us, then we can manage and deal with that. It's when we don't have the awareness and things get out of control, like, from relationship issues to health issues, you just got to have your finger on the pulse of like, okay, how are we managing this? And do a check-in on yourself and your family and everybody else, because it's just life, and we like to describe it as riding the roller coaster of life at the moment. It's up and downs, and there's goods and bads, but one of the key things is having awareness of how you're feeling, how you're navigating this, and hanging around like-minded people to help and support you through it.
Yeah, well said. I think you do need the like-minded people to be there for you, help you out, and get you through. And you're right, you have your good times, you have your bad times. We're going into October, and what happens in October? Anyone? It's normally when the markets have a big crash. If it's going to have a crash, statistically, it's October. And it's funny, a few different people have brought this up to my attention that October,
Of course, yeah.
yeah. Now, Adrian, you didn't answer the question. Do you think rates are going up or down, or you don't care?
I think they would be very silly to do anything with interest rates that would affect the upcoming referendum vote. So they will delay it until after that vote, because they would be that the parties have got too much to lose to alienate voters for this referendum by doing something and tweaking it. So they're going to keep everything constant so everyone can focus on that. School holidays finish. Kids have got to go back to school. They do not want an angry population. And as you said, we're not the only people that know recessions and stock market crashes come in October. There's also a mental thing and hangover. Whereas in the Northern Territory, Northern Hemisphere, that is the harvest. And if it's a good harvest, you have a safe winter. We have it of, you know, how are we going to spend our long summer holidays with the kids if things don't go right, because most people are not going to be at work over that period of time until January. So, you know, people are going to be shopping for lots of different things that happen at the end of the year, like company Christmas parties, which are traditionally in November, because they know they can't have them in December. And December, people have family get-togethers for the seasons. I mean, we've just finished Jewish New Year a couple of weeks ago, where, you know, there's all these knock-on effects. I grew up with my father telling me the British came to Australia and said, marked out territory and said, this land belongs to me, whereas the Aboriginal mentality was that they belong to the land. And I said to my wife when we had our kids, she said, our kids. I said, well, they're not our kids. We're their parents. We belong to them. They don't belong to us. And that concept of ownership, do we ever own our spouses? Do we ever own anything? You don't have to become a minimalist and have a minimalist life, but you're safer in going through life not having that attachment to ownership. In most situations, do you own your own emotions? Those feelings that you have, do they belong to you, or should they belong to somebody else or something else? Is it a different time they belong to? Which is, that's getting a bit woo-woo. But if you look at, if most of the problems in the world that are war are related to real estate ownership and religion, and they're intertwined, because religion for a lot of people was their spirituality. Before we became empowered and enlightened and self-learning, we relied on religion to tell us what our belief system was. So now people are coming out of those institutions and self-learning, self-discovery, choosing their own path and belief systems. Those belief systems will become just as antiquated or corrupt if you are attached to things and allow yourself to seek ownership of those things, because we need to own ourselves first. And should we aspire to own our spouse or our children or our beliefs? If everybody is so independent of society and our greater population, isn't that what got us into these problems in the first place? Marking out our territory, building bigger fences around our properties to keep people out, not talking to our neighbors, not engaging with our communities is where all the problems have began. So if we're moving towards a world which, if you look around at what small business are doing, they're engaging in connecting with the wider community and like-minded people far away. You don't have to become a prepper or anti-government. You just need to engage with people to not feel that you're, you know, building an empire behind walls. No man is an island. You know, it's isolationism is a big mistake. Look at North Korea. Look at Russia. Isolation is the antidote to being well. You know, look at cultures that have inbreeding. Look at, you know, all of that is a recipe for long-term disaster. And countries of different description think in different lengths of time. Hundreds of years, tens of years, 5 years, 1 year. What does the average family have in their plan? Is it 100 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 5 months ahead?
Well, I think we're coming to the end. So one of the common themes that was brought up by both Sally and Adrian was ownership. And it's interesting you both brought up ownership, because a rich man actually doesn't own anything.
Correct.
Yeah, if you speak to a rich man, he will not own anything, but he will control everything. So that's the motto of the rich man. So thank you guys for your input today.
Not so much control. He's rewarded. The rich man, you don't own anything. You're rewarded and you have returns, but you benefit from that non-ownership. It's a really difficult concept because we're brought up with it. It's just like we're brought up to copy and imitate. That's how we learn. So, you know, if we learn to write by imitation, learn to speak by imitation, learn to swim from imitation, what's to say? I mean, we imitate how our financial literacy is acquired as well. It's by imitation. So there's something to think about when we're moving Paul Cummins to his next residence. When the rent goes up.
I'm hoping Paul's locked in his current rent for a long time. I think he has anyway, because so he's learned from his errors. He's locked in for a long term, which is great. And Sally, you've got a mortgage and a rent, I believe. Yeah.
No, I don't have a mortgage, so I just.
No, you don't have a mortgage. Okay, I thought you had a mortgage. All right. So
the other thing I was going to bring up, which we can talk about next week, is land tax. That's the other thing. So
well, we can get a bit controversial about the taxes and the banks, how the banks screw us over and things like that. So look, thank you for your input today, and we'll all catch up next week.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.